My name is Paul Nurkkala. I started flying drones in 2015, won a world championship in 2018, and used the skills that I gained there to find my way onto sets with drones.
Can you think of like a particularly big or flashy or maybe notable project that you worked on?
Two of my biggest recent projects that I've worked on were one, the launch of the Ford Lightning. I did some FPV shots for that. And then a feature film that is a Hulu original called Mother Android, just aired like 2 days ago. If this is filmed in late December. And yeah, both of them were incredible experiences.
Let's start with the period where you're an FPV hobbyist.
Mhm.
And let's try and sort of talk about how you made the transition to being a pro.
When I first started flying drones, I actually was working full time as a programmer, and I was happy with being a programmer and being a part of that world. But I always kind of thought, like, I'll never be the best programmer at something, right? There's so many talented programmers out there. There have been for the last, at that time, 40 or 50 years. And so, like, measuring up to those guys is going to be really, really hard. However, at the same time, I was at the beginning of this hobby of drone racing and drones and flying. There's gonna be a lot of people out there that are like, "Oh, you were really late. You started in 2015." I've been flying drones since 2010, but I don't care. But I started flying them, and I got into this hobby and started doing drone racing. And at the same time as I had started getting into FPV, and YouTube and stuff started taking off, and the opportunities to join, for example, the Drone Racing League were there. The company that I was working for as a programmer dried up, and so I started to kind of transition out of working as for a company and into like freelance work as a programmer. And then it gave me the opportunity to slowly transition out of even programming at all when I started flying full time for the Drone Racing League and getting filming gigs and making a little bit of money on YouTube. So, this combination of I'm kind of done with the thing that I had been doing, and the slow turn into I could actually, make a living doing drones, just encouraged me to kind of slowly make that step. So from about 2017 January on, I've been full-time drones in some form or another, whether that's racing, content creation, or filming, or consulting.
So I think a lot of people who are thinking about making flying drones a full-time job, I feel like the path of win a seat on DRL and use that to help you transition, that's probably not one that a lot of people are going to be able to replicate. Do you think that it could have happened if you hadn't had that to carry you through? Because I mean, that was a paying gig, right?
The opportunity to fly for DRL definitely helped me in my professional drone flying career, right? It was a very black and white opportunity to sign on the dotted line, have some amount of income available, and to go after that dream. But I don't think it's the only way to go about doing that. In fact, it's a very niche thing, very focused on, competing with drones. It definitely is a nice thing to be able to say, like, on set, like, hey, I'm the 2019 world champion of drones. Like, it gives you some credibility, but let your work stand for yourself, right? It doesn't matter what your past is. If you're not delivering in the moment, nobody cares, right? You got to figure out, how do I, build my skills, build that list of clients, and start using word of mouth and different techniques to get in front of more and more people to then work for more and more people.
What was your first sort of commercial job?
Yeah.
Where you're working for somebody else?
So my first commercial job, like where, it's no longer just for YouTube or for the Drone Racing League or something, like, but like for another client, was actually, I actually basically had gone down the route of, I'm going to start a full service production company. So rather than just being focused on drones, I'm going to do it all, right? I'm going to have a couple cameras, I'm going to get some mics and some lights and all this stuff, which I did buy. And we landed a client with a local tricking company. A friend of mine actually happens to work there, so I had a really good, like, kind of direct connection to that company to kind of pitch them on, doing this like marketing video for them. So, we went there, we interviewed like 30 people for a long time for each person with a bunch of different cameras, and got B-roll with like a DJI Ronin that we had bought. So like we made this, like, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 investment in a large chunk of gear, more than drones. And I think the only drone shots that we actually did for that were with like a Mavic, and this is well into my interest in FPV. I think it was just before the time of Cine Whoops and Fly Through. So that probably would have been a part of that video if it had been around at that time. But my actual first jump into the world of commercial filmmaking didn't involve drones at all. It was, I want to make a video. I know that I have these skills from having worked on YouTube and doing this sort of thing. How can I start to convert that into like paid projects? And that kind of gave me that initial jump off point to say, okay, I want to use the skills that I have as a drone racer combined with what I'm trying to teach myself as a filmmaker, to then go after these things. So, my goal with starting a production company was, I know drones really well, but I don't know the production side. And if I go out and I just, if I land some clients and I learn the production side, I'm going to be that much better equipped as a drone filmmaker to approach production companies and work on their behalf.
That's really interesting, because I don't think anyone I've interviewed so far has had that exact approach. Most people come at it, they say, I'm a pilot, and then they get in touch with whoever to get connections to do drone shots. But I think you're the first one I've talked to who is doing like a full production.
Had done. Yeah.
Had done. Now, so are you still doing full production, or are you pretty much doing drone stuff now?
I am no longer doing full production. I'm very just focused on drone stuff in general. I found that the barrier to entry for full service production was a little bit higher than I wanted to go. It was a lot more work and a lot of work that I didn't necessarily want to be doing. Like whether that's on the editing side or like, I'm going to figure out how to light this. And then, when I made that piece, I sent it to a bunch of people that are like, wow, that's something. You made a video. Here's all the 18 million things I would have done differently. And it was like, like, that's fine. There's always a learning opportunity there. And I'm so grateful that I did that, because it helped me to start speaking the language of production and to know the work that goes into it, and to know how small of a piece drones are to pretty much all productions out there, no matter how important it feels in the moment. Was interesting. So I'm no longer doing full service production. I think I would enjoy it more now that I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of both ways. But the opportunities with drones have continued to grow and grow, I think, for the world, not just for me. And so I'm happy to continue staying in my lane and doing drones better and better.
So your first job was a personal connection. You said there was somebody you knew who worked for a trekking company, and you basically just said, hey, did you just work for them for free, or did you just pitch them?
When you're approaching your first few clients, right, there's this temptation, I think, to say, I'm going to do it for free. And I don't think that that's a very healthy way to approach things, necessarily, because one, for you, it's harder than the second time to go and ask for money for it. I think, like, if you don't set that precedent right away, it's a weird conversation no matter what. Like when you're saying, hey, I need to get paid for my services, like that's a weird conversation no matter who you are, what circumstance you're in. Like it's just awkward. And so, my recommendation is to go in and say, what can you afford? Like what I know, this is where I want to be playing. And this is like, I want, say I want $500 for the day or whatever. Like that's, for a first gig. I know that might not necessarily be something that you can achieve. Where can we meet in the middle and get something on the books, right? And just make that then a business connection, right? Not just like a favor or an opportunity, because then both sides treat it very differently, right? If you're working for money, you're going to treat it more professionally than you would if you were doing it for free. And on the opposite side of things, if they're paying for it, they're going to be more responsive. They're going to, know that they're invested in it. They're going to help you get through that final edit so that they can get the piece that they paid for to get out. So I would always say, no matter what, if you can find a way to not do anything for free, do it for something, even if it's just a little bit, but use that as a place to start practicing those negotiation techniques and that process of figuring out, hey, I got to get paid for what I'm doing here.
That's one of the best pieces of advice anybody ever gave me as a business person or an entrepreneur, which is that if the customer can't meet what you normally would charge them, find something you can give them that's in their budget. Because if they say, I can't afford $800 a day for 3 days to do like a full service fly through, say, well, what could you afford? And they say, I don't know. Now they have to give you a number. Right. They're not going to say zero, probably. Right.
Yeah.
They might say, oh, $500. And you go, okay, well, here's what I give. And now you've started the transaction. You're showing them what you can do. You're showing them the value, but you're still not working for free. It's a great piece of advice no matter what business you're in.
And there's a time and a place to do stuff for free, right? I still do stuff for free currently. But I measure those costs very carefully. And in knowing that, like on one side, it might, if I break something doing a free shoot, I'm not going to recover that cost. Or, my time is valuable. Your time is valuable, whoever is watching this. And you need to remember that, that no matter what you're doing, your time should have a dollar value assigned to it. But when you're, there is a time and a place where something is like, okay, this is a cool opportunity. There is no money here. There is no chance of there being money here, but it's going to create opportunities, start to weigh that, start to measure that carefully, and decide, is that something that is worth potentially damaging gear? Is it worth the effort and the time that I'm spending on it? And know that, but always aim for, in the professional world, at least put something to paper so that you can say, so that there's accountability on both sides.
Let's talk about, when would you do something for free? Like, for example, there's, Michael Bay calls you up and says, you want to work on the next Transformers movie. A whole lot of people would do anything just to get on set and get that on their resume. On the other hand, they got a $50 million budget. Surely they can afford you.
Yeah.
So like, how do you do that calculus? When do you decide to do something for free, and when do you insist that you need to get paid?
I'll give an example of something that I did recently for free, that I think generally would have been a paid shoot. I got reached out to by a Supercross team, which is like the indoor small circuit motorbikes, like going, jumping through stuff and going around a circuit. This company, or this team, reached out to me. They're like, hey, like, we're just three guys. We cover all of our own costs to fly places, to stay in hotels. Like, the prize money at the end of the season is like 20 grand. Like, it's not, they have relatively no money, considering the amount of capital that they have to invest to do what they're doing. But what we can do is give you full access to the course. We're going to have 3 world-class drivers, or riders here. We're going to have 2 full days of, you can do whatever you want as long as we can, share the footage. And that footage is fully yours and ours. You can do whatever you want with it. You can post it. You can do anything. And so I looked at that opportunity and I said, I can get to the location relatively cheap. I have equipment here that I can use on it, that I think I can cover the cost of if something happens. And I have this cool subject that is hard to come by, right? Especially with world level guys that are doing it. And I said, okay, I need to create some marketing material. I've got a new camera that I want to promote, that I have to fly. I've got a couple different aspects of this that I haven't seen done before, that I want to try for myself to get it on the reel. And it's going to put me in front of the sponsors of the team, right? They're sponsored by Kawasaki. They're involved with Supercross. Supercross is sponsored by Monster Energy or Red Bull or whoever it is that given year. And so, now I'm saying, I'm going to do all of this work for free. The product that I'm getting out of it is I'm building stuff that's going to go into my reel, that is going to be used to show other motorsports what I can do with the drone. And then it also has the added benefit of putting it in front of potential clients with money that could be working for it. So, the decision to do it for free was, one, it was an invitation. It's like, hey, we got a free day of, do whatever you want, get that content, make a unique perspective on something that I haven't had in my personal arsenal that I can use to sell other people. And then it's also putting me in front of big dollar brands that could happen in the future. So, I can do something relatively cheap or free for a team of people that I believe in. I think they can have success, and they're not necessarily paying me for that service, but the value add that I get far exceeds the amount of free work that I would have been doing on that, in that behalf. So
so it's got to be an exchange of value. Basically, you got to be getting something out of it. I think, especially when you talked about you being able to own the footage at the end, that seems like a minimum for a free job. Whereas if you have a paying client, they may expect to own the footage, sign NDAs, and all that nonsense.
And even with paid clients that own the footage, 99% of the time they're okay with you using that footage to promote yourself. Like, there's been I can think of 4 or 5 examples of all of the clients I've had that are like, absolutely do not post this or share it of any kind. Like, I mean, even Ford was okay with me using it after the commercial aired. They're just like, oh yeah, cool, just tag us and it's rising tide lifts all ships. And the other ones are like on a 2-year NDA, the footage isn't going to be seen until 2024 or something like that. And even at that point, I'm sure they're probably going to be like, whatever, go ahead. Or they don't care at that point because it's 4 years old,
So so you did your first job, for the trekking company. And at some point you have to transition, right? You can't just make one job, but now if you're going to do this full time, you have to sort of create this pipeline where you have new business coming in. Talk about how you market yourself, how you make connections with people. Because there's a lot of people out there and there's like, who would pay me for my services? Who is trying to hire people like me, and how do I find them?
So the place to start when you are trying to find professional work, paid professional work, is to build a reel, right? You need to have a demonstration of what you can do with the drone, and it has to be a kind of collection of unique looking clips that showcase that give people ideas, right? So whether that's using footage that you've done flying around your house, or like basic level clients where one-to-one approach the local bar and say, hey, I want to do a fly through, like all those kinds of things. Build that collection of footage and make it unique, make it something that stands out against any other fly through, or against traditional drones where you are dealing with the like, oh yeah, my nephew's got a drone sort of situation. Then the place that I took that is to production companies. So rather than going directly from business to business, which I could do, I'm not interested in doing, because they're there's a lot more work that is involved there. Is I show a production company, hey, here's what I can do with this drone. Here's how it could be used with the productions that you've got going on. Here's how it would benefit. Like I have literally even like taken final products from production companies, downloaded off of YouTube, cut in a similar shot that I think would have worked well in their production, sent it back to them and said, here's what I think we could have done together. Can we work on an upcoming project together? And people are, respond very well to that, because like, it's like, oh, sick, I've got a new tool in the bucket. They're a production company, so they're like literally they're going like line by line and saying, okay, we're gonna have camera A is gonna cost this much. We're gonna have these 3 people, it's gonna cost this much. So to bring you on is gonna say, oh yeah, we're going to bring this person on for their day rate with their equipment as just another line item. And then that's all going to go straight to the client. So you're not saying, hey, production company, can you pay me to do my work? They're saying, oh, we could have another sick tool that we could use to market to our clients that is going to then help you come on and be a part of it. So you're not asking a production company for money. You're saying, can I be an asset for you in your creative pitch to your clients in the future? And so that's kind of the technique that I've used, is instead of saying, let me make something for you from the ground up business, it's production company, let me be a tool in your tool bag of creative prowess, and here's how I think it could fit into what you're doing now.
That's interesting. I think that the people I've talked to so far have marketed more directly. I'm not sure exactly whether they're marketing to production companies or whether they're marketing directly to like producers or DPs or
Yeah.
whoever. But it's interesting because it means that the production company now, you're just taking advantage of their connections and their marketing
Yes.
pipeline.
Yep.
And you just become an asset to them. But
Yep.
when you say you reached out to production companies, let's say somebody wanted to follow that strategy. They're like, okay, well, what do I look in the yellow pages under production company? Yeah, I'm old. Like, how do you find production companies? Who are they? How do you find them?
That's not far off. So like the first production company that I worked with, I kind of stumbled across it. I went to I think it was a Christmas party for an arcade bar. My friend was going. He was like, "Hey, can you come hang out?" And I sat down. I was talking to the owner, like, "Oh, this is really cool." He's like, "What do you do?" I was like, "Oh, I fly drones. I fly drones inside. I do these really cool like things." He's like, "Oh, that's really cool. We're actually working on a video right now through production company A." That company was called Teardrop Pictures, and I've worked with them a bunch of times. Small little local production company here in Indianapolis. And and so I got to meet Caitlin, is who runs Teardrop Productions. And now every time she works on a for that bar, we work together and got kind of a cool fly through shot. And then she adds that to her reel. I add it to my reel. And now whenever she's out selling another product, she says, "Oh, by the way, we can also do blah," and is literally selling me for me. And I don't have to do anything except show up that one day and fly. So, I got lucky with the first production company that I worked with, because it just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I guarantee that if you're anywhere near any like slightly major city, there's 10 production companies that work within there that are, doing videos for churches or businesses or offices, or, like where they're, setting up and doing interviews. Like there are tons of production companies out there that are always looking for a new edge against the other 9 production companies that are in town. And if you can offer them something that none of the other people can do, it's a pretty good opportunity. Just here's another sword in your sheath, or here's another arrow in your quiver of cool techniques to be able to sell more and better work to your clients. So going to the yellow pages really isn't that bad of an idea. Like I literally, like I can go online here, I'm at my computer, and I say Indianapolis production company, and I can see 40 already. Like and I can just contact them, call them, whatever, if I was trying to get a hold of them.
The other guys that I've talked to so far, they seem to have a different marketing strategy than you. So I'm going to kind of
Yeah,
just
please.
sort of get you to speak to theirs. Like Ciati talked a lot about, he's like, you gotta have your stuff on Instagram. That's where I made all my connections, and Tommy talked about posting to YouTube. I think that plays into a little bit of the fact that Tommy got in a little earlier and Instagram wasn't as big then. Do you find that your social media, your Instagram, your YouTube, maybe your TikTok, I don't know, do you find that helps you make professional connections, or is it just sort of more like a side gig?
My Instagram, my social media is absolutely definitely key to finding new business. So alongside of, if I'm going to say I'm getting started on one end to find new opportunities to create, to build a network of people that I can work for consistently to do professional FPV, it's going to be hard for those people to find my Instagram organically, right? If I don't have a very big Instagram, or I don't have a way of influencing in the city that I'm in, it's going to be hard for people to find that necessarily. Throughout that whole process, I absolutely highly recommend building your social media, because the vast majority of my business now that I've established myself as a professional FPV person, does come through social media. So I've definitely had projects come through TikTok. I've had projects, unbelievably high number of projects come through Instagram, like to the point where I pay someone not insignificant amount of money to be helping me make Instagram content every day of the week for the entire year, to make sure that there's constantly fresh stuff growing, building that Instagram page. I get a decent amount through YouTube. I happen to be in the position where my YouTube has, over 100,000 subscribers. So that's there's a reach benefit of having a big YouTube, if that makes sense. But yeah, absolutely. You should have a reel. That is something that you directly send to people when they ask, what can you do? But then you should also be treating your social media as a reel. It is marketing. It is the opportunity for people to reach out and be like, oh, I've never seen that before. Can I have you do that for me too on my project? So when you're getting started, definitely work with local businesses, get started right there, but be building your social media along the way. And your marketing is then a gradually shift, I think, towards the social media side of things, because you have a bigger reach, you have a bigger influence, and people will see it more and more often.
Yeah, I mean, and those things really seem like they complement each other. The thing is that if you have no social media because you're new, you can still call up a production company. You can show them what you can do, and they'll hire you. They're not hiring you for your reach as an influencer. They just want your skills.
Right.
But then as you get more and more work, you can use that stuff to build your reel. You can use that stuff to build your prominence on social media, and those two things can kind of feed back into each other.
There's a feedback cycle between the more work you do, the cooler stuff you have to post, the more work you get, the cooler stuff you have to post. I mean, you think about, like let's look at the top dog, right? Is Johnny FPV, right? Everything he posts ends up going viral. It creates a new way of looking at how FPV works, so more people are going to hire him to make that content for them. Then he comes up with a new way of doing it, whether that's going from GoPro to City Lifter, or City Lifter to Free Fly Wave with the Porsche video, like sort of stuff like that. So like you think in that term of like, if I create something cool, I can market myself to do something more cool the next time. And it kind of builds this feedback loop of better and better clients and projects and opportunities.
Let's talk about your gear. Obviously, like a full gear rundown could be a whole video on its own, but
yeah.
can you give us a list of the things that you kind of, the major things that you work with on a day-to-day basis?
In terms of gear, start with Cine Whoops. There are so many opportunities for Cine Whoops, whether that's, just little ducted guys, whether that's a sub 250 or a Squirt or a Cinema or something like that. Like that is my moneymaker still today, right? I don't want it to be. I really want to be more on the Cine Lifter side, but people still see old Cine Whoop videos and are like, that is really cool. I want to see you do that for my company or my business or my production, whatever's going on. It's super easy. It's relatively cheap. You can just use a GoPro, and that's easy, right? As you continue to graduate, and you find the need for it, 5-inch FPV sort of style drones for filming definitely creates interesting opportunities, especially for higher speed, higher precision things. And then, the top of the line right now for FPV, actually not even quite the top of the line for FPV right now, is Cine Lifters. So taking a red Komodo or a Free Fly Wave or something like that and strapping it to a drone and hurtling it through the air is pretty, we're starting to see a lot of that, especially in car commercials and feature films. And then the top of the line right now is actually gimbaled FPV. We've seen a few different companies now be posting kind of their secret project that they've been working on. That's a big innovation, which is just a drone with a gimbal on it, but it's a big innovation. So now that's kind of the next big thing is how do we do high precision flying, but make sure that we have everything stabilized in body of the camera with a gimbal. So that's kind of the order in which I would try to progress through the ranks of FPV today if I was starting from the ground up, especially with the popularity of fly-throughs. Like, holy cow, if I was starting FPV today, it would be so much easier to get into it than when I started before Cinewhoops existed.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying that somebody who wants to get started, the Cinelifters with the red Komodo, that's like the flashy thing. But it sounds like you could probably do okay with, a couple of 3-inch Cinewhoops and a GoPro and doing like just fly-throughs for your local bar. That's actually sounds like that's the bread and butter is what you're saying.
You have 30 local bars. None of them are going to hire you to fly a red through their bar. They're going to hire you to fly the GoPro through the bar. Not because it's safe or scary or anything, but like it meets the budget, right? So like build your product, buy your product based on the opportunities that you can get. And so once you start landing those clients that want to be flying a red Komodo, that's when you go get that gear. And to be honest, like I don't even own a Komodo. I have Cinelifters that I know and work on and tune and make sure that they're really good to go. And I show up and they give me the camera with the right settings, with the right media, and I just fly their stuff, which is even better because then if something happens, God forbid, it's not even my camera. Like it's they're gonna have the preference of camera and stuff like they want at that level. So I honestly don't even recommend buying a cinema camera if you can help it.
Well, let's talk about, because I bet a lot of people don't realize sort of the relationship between sort of what's your gear and what's your responsibility and what is somebody else's responsibility. Like you said, they hand you the camera, it's got all the settings on it. Mm-hmm. I assume you're talking about like a big motion picture set there where there's a director of photography. On a bigger set, can you break down some of the different roles and responsibilities that other people have versus what you bring to the table that maybe people who haven't been on a set don't understand?
Yeah, so sets can be really confusing. First of all, find a friend on set. Actually, let me rewind. Don't go to set by yourself for the first time. If you're somehow magically hired to just go straight to a movie set, not through a production company, not through a drone company or something like that, and it's just you and your drone, like honestly, don't take it. Like, unless you can find a way to partner up with a drone company or partner up with an FPV person with experience or a drone person with experience, because it is a very scary place to be. Because it happened to me. So I got hired to work on a feature film. It's a Miramax film called Mother Android. It's on Hulu. It's a Hulu original. And I pretty much just showed up with a drone, a couple drones, and I had no idea what set etiquette was. It didn't help that it was in COVID times. This was like October of 2020. So everybody is like double mask, face shield, like it's crazy. And there are so many different moving parts on a set that you can't even imagine, right? You have to know who DIT is. You have to know who the video team is. You have to know the camera department, the stunt department, the drone department, because there's a different drone team there that was totally unrelated to what I was doing. You have to be able to interact and be ready for the director, for the DP. Like these are all just different roles that I knew a little bit about ahead of time, but like without somebody to kind of educate me on what all of those were, I would have been totally screwed. So I got really lucky in that when I got to set, we had a practical version of the drone that they were flying on camera. Like, so there was actually a drone in the scene. And so Andy Shen helped build this drone for this camera that like the visual effects supervisor was literally like 3D scanning and like making models of it so that they could put it into the movie later. And I was actually flying it for the camera as part of this. And because I got to have this relationship with the visual effects supervisor who has been in the industry for 40 years, he worked on the original Matrix bullet time scene. Like it's ridiculous. It was super cool. He helped me navigate set. He brought me to DIT to say, what camera name do you want it to be? What format do you want to shoot? What frame rate? What color temperature? All of these things that like I know what they are, but I need to know what they need to have set on the camera for this. Then he, brought me over to the camera department where I figured out where in the shot list of the day I was going to be set up to shoot and all of these things. And so all I have to say is don't go to a set by yourself. Find someone with experience to go with you, hire them to go with you, or have the production company hire someone to go with you, because you should not show up to a set by yourself ever, because it will set a bad example for what FPV could be in the industry, right? We don't want to hurt other people's opportunities, including yourself, to get back on set. And we want people to be hiring FPV because we believe in the medium. We know what it looks like. So, don't oversell yourself. Make sure that you are approaching everything with the professionalism and with the knowledge that it deserves, if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered your question at all, but
oh no, it's all gold, man. It's all gold. You go a different direction, and I'm like, oh, that's good. you know, you know, that's the point of the interviews, is to get these perspectives. It sounds like you're saying that in addition to being a pilot, you also sort of need to have an understanding of what the camera's doing, whether that's because you're running the GoPro yourself for a little fly through of a bar and you just need to make sure it looks good. Or even if you are working with a director of photography who's going to hand you a red Komodo and have it set up exactly how he wants or she wants, you still need an understanding of basics of sort of cinematography and cameras. And then there's also an aspect of sort of the etiquette of the set and it's not the politics, but the sort of logistics of a set.
Honestly, politics works in this circumstance, because basically the director and the DP are going to be out there like, we want the most creative thing in the world. And then the producer is going to be, we're running out of money, we need to finish now. So like literally there was a moment on set on Mother Android where the director is saying, we're going one more time, in one ear. And literally on the other side of me, the producer is saying, we don't have time, we need to get to other stuff. And I don't know what's happening. So I just have to be ready. And they're, I'm like the kid sitting on the couch watching mom and dad fight while they're like literally battling back and forth to decide if they're going to go for another drone shot, of which I'm like, oh my God, do I have all the batteries charged? Is the camera ready? Is the exposure set right on the camera? Because I'm here by myself with the director and the producer fighting over top of whether or not you get to go. So like, it's politics, right? You have to be ready at all times. And the other side of it is, when the director says action, I was not ready for the adrenaline dump that happened in that moment, because there are literally 150 people standing around waiting for you to be finished with your shot, because if the drone's in the air, they can't be filming anything else because they're going to get in the way, or you're going to see them, or there's going to be a safety situation. There's literally 150 people that are all being paid, I don't know how many thousands of dollars a day. Like, for the, the 5 minutes that my drone's in the air, it probably costs the whole production $100,000. That's a guess. I have no idea. But like, there is an absurd price tag tied to that. And you realize that in the moment when the director says action. Oh my gosh. So now I have to fly this $4,000 drone with a nice camera that's not really designed to be flung through the woods, is where we were filming. There's 100 people waiting for me to fail. The director is standing there in my ear saying, no, do this, do that, do it differently, do it faster. The producer is saying, we're done, we're out of time, get finished with this. And you're still expected to perform at the world class level of FPV that you've been practicing to be. And if you're not ready for that, and you don't love that experience, so that pressure, you might want to think about something else, because it was like, I raced in 2018 for my world championship. This was way more stressful than that. Being on set is way more stressful than competing at the world level.
A perspective I think people may not have is the things that are difficult about being a pro pilot on like a set. Like, I think a lot of people might think you have to be a great pilot to be a pro. Like, you have to be able to fly the drone. But I think there's probably a lot more skills involved that people might not expect. So what kind of skills do you need to bring to the table to be like a pro pilot, other than just being a great pilot? Or is even being a great pilot even that important?
Usually the least difficult part about being on set is the flying. Now, there's exceptions, like there's some stunts and stuff that people are doing where like Vanovers flying underneath like ambulances, jumping off of other cars and stuff like that. Like, that's hard. Don't get me wrong. But knowing how to be ready, knowing when to be ready, knowing where to be in the right place at the right time to create more opportunities for yourself, right? It's a set is essentially a collaboration, right? If you have an idea, with care, you might need to propose it, or In the moment you say, what if we did it this way? Or so, sometimes the director is just like, this is what I want, this is what you're going to get, I don't care about anything else. That's fine too. But knowing how to navigate all of that stuff and all of that pressure, and in those situations, like, when I did the Ford Lightning commercial, I had Wally Pfister, who's the director of the commercial, was Christopher Nolan's DP for Inception and Batman, and he is like, basically A-list director of photography, like, top dog. And when you've been sitting around for 16 hours waiting for your opportunity to shoot, and drone is usually the first or last shot of the day because you can't control light, right? You got to wait for the good light. When you have a red Komodo strapped to your drone waiting, and all of a sudden it's your turn, and the director walks up to you and is like, I'm going to swear on this, you can bleep it if you need to, but he's like, why is that fucking thing not in the air fucking right now? We're fucking losing light. Like, you got to get that thing up right now. And you're like, and again, you've got to be ready. It is not because we were unprepared for it. It's just, that's the pacing. That's what happens. He's not angry at you. He's just like, we're going to get it now. We're going to do it now as fast as we possibly can. And you got to be prepared for that pressure, for that circumstance, and be ready to get it in the air. So, once the drone takes off, easy peasy, right? You're just flying a drone. Everything else that goes into that, that's the hard part. How to be charged, how to know the camera settings, how to have the camera settings ready, how to which radio do you grab, and who do you return the radio to, where's Crafty, like all of this stuff. These are questions that you have to just innately know, because no one's going to help you solve them, which is why you shouldn't go to a set by yourself for the first time like I did.
Let me ask you this. What is the hardest shot that anybody asked you to get? Up to it, maybe up to and including a shot that was impossible, but probably more interesting if you pulled it off.
The hardest shot I think I've had to get so far was a roller coaster chase. The shot that they needed for the video that they're working on, I was basically just following the roller coaster, but the roller coaster goes through a double corkscrew at the end. And I can send you this footage if you want to use it. It flies through the coaster goes through a double corkscrew, and they wanted me to fly between the roller coaster and the tracks through the double corkscrew, which is a sweet idea. But what happens when you're going like a corkscrew, you think that there's a straight line, but when the coaster's in there, it feels like the walls are shifting on you. It feels like you're flying through something that's moving because of just the weird perspective changes that happen with your head. So getting it timed to go through the corkscrew without hitting the coaster or anything was one of the trickiest shots I've ever had to get, and I got it. It was not quite as close as I wanted it to be. Like, I was a little bit off the tail end of the coaster, but it still looked pretty awesome. I was really stoked with it. But that's the hardest from a flying perspective shot that anyone's ever asked me to get.
Can you talk about the Ford Lightning shot where you were underneath the? Yep. Only because I've heard you tell this story before, and I think it's a great story.
So for the Ford Lightning commercial, the one shot that they wanted me to get, or the most important shot that they wanted me to get, was to basically fly the drone underneath the F-150 and come out the other side looking back at it as it drives off into the sunset. It was like the last shot of the video, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to basically, I'm approaching the truck, get to the ground level, fly underneath, turn around, and jump up. What I didn't know before we got there was that they never expected me to actually do that practically in camera. They had a plan on how they were going to fake it. I was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, it makes it a lot easier because that's a pretty hard shot to get. And the biggest problem was that Ford Lightning was a one of one. So there were literally no other trucks in the world. So if we dented it or hit it or messed anything up, that was a multi-million-dollar commercial that was just done for, because there's not another truck to replace it. Wally Pfister, DP for Christopher Nolan, he did not work on Tenet, but a lot of his stunt team who was there on the day did work on Tenet, which is basically like half of the movie is backwards, and it's choreographed backwards. So that's the driver from the truck was one of the drivers in Tenet who was driving the truck backwards for the movie. And so what they did was figure out how to basically, they put the drone on the ground, they pulled the truck up to the tailgate over it, and then backed the truck up as fast as they possibly could, like just full throttle. And at the same moment, I took off. As soon as the truck was clear, I would take off. And then we did the opposite, where I sat at the front of the truck and they drove over it, and I took off backwards. So with a little bit of camera trickery, with a little bit of reversing footage, and then I also had to mount the GoPro upside down on the drone, because like obviously as soon as you take off, you got to Otherwise, I'd be looking at the sky. So I just flipped the camera upside down, put it on the drone on the ground, and just took off backwards. They were able to then have the drone look like it flew down to the ground, got to the ground level. They did a little VFX lightning bolt clack to kind of fake that transition, and then pull out on the back end of the shot within forward speed instead of reverse speed. And it made it look like I flew underneath the truck. And it was just this awesome, like, and in terms of flying that, again, super easy. Literally all I did was take off and fly slightly backwards. And I took off and fly slightly backwards. That was it. But the effect ended up looking absolutely incredible because of the way the filmmakers planned the whole thing out. And again, in that moment, I wasn't really ready to put my GoPro upside down on the drone backwards. I didn't know that was what we were going to be doing, but I had the tools and the equipment and the expertise to adapt to that situation, get it ready, and be available. So again, hardest part was not flying the drone. It was being ready and able to take advantage of, or to get the shot that they asked me to get.
You talked about the pressure. You got to be ready when the director says you're ready to go, batteries, radio, etc. Can you think of a time when something went wrong, like something potentially catastrophic went wrong, and how you dealt with that or how you responded to it?
When did I screw up the most? I'm trying to think of all the time, first of all. And I think of a good example, though. I'm glad that I'm struggling to think of these moments. Well, stuff doesn't always happen in the ideal way. I'm prepared to handle it in the alternative ways. So, I think we all probably have like our favorite drone, right? Like the drone that we prefer to fly the most. I have a fleet of identical drones, but like there's two of them that I like trust the most. Say one of those isn't working that morning, or you had a crash. You don't have crashes on set, but I will freestyle mine once in a while. And like, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't working, or something like that. To have backups for everything, right? So I go to set if I'm doing a GoPro job with 5 GoPros and 20 batteries. I go with 6 drones. I go with redundant everything. I have 2 sets of goggles. I have 2 controllers, sometimes 3 controllers. I have multiple battery chargers, right? If I just bring one charger and that one dies, I'm SOL. So I have multiple chargers. I have all extra props and everything. So like, it's not just about do I have the equipment here to get this shot? It's, do I have the equipment here to get this shot a million times, knowing that I was going to kill a drone each time doing that thing, right? Like, so it's not just about, the moments that I'm trying to think of where I had my worst mistakes and how I handled them were, I handled it before I ever got there, right? I am prepared for every circumstance as much as I can be. The worst example recently, I'm just going to say a company. I don't know if they want me to necessarily go into too many details. And we did a full day of testing before we ever went on set. And I flew to a certain location that was like my A point for the shot. So I was going to start the shot there and then fly into something and go through a shot. And we tested this A point a bunch of different times from one location. And the morning of, they decided to change it to a different location. And so when we said, okay, get the drone in the air, get to the A position, I got to the A position and the drone just fail-safed. Totally just fell out of the sky. No explanation. It was a city whoop, so it wasn't like the end of the world for the drone, but the drone fell into a location that it was impossible to retrieve it from. And that camera had the GoPro that had all of the footage from the morning of shooting. So this was like our, we had one shot that we had done in the morning that was now inaccessible because of where the drone was. I'm not going to give more details as to where or why, but we couldn't get it back, at that point. And who would have thought, right? We planned it, we tested it, we had a slight change as to where we were operating from, but it was all within what I expected to be normal operating parameters. And something happened, couldn't get the drone back. That footage is lost. We had a ton of extras involved in the scene that were no longer there or available. So we couldn't just go redo the shot. That was lost for good. So, at that point, it's like, you just go to the client, you say, this is what happened. I can't explain why. Drones are fickle. We don't have that footage anymore. And whatever I need to do to make it right, whether that's I'm coming back for a free day in the future, or whatever we can do. We worked on it the best that we could, and there was nothing we could do, and they ended up having to reshoot it like a few days later with a different person who was more local, and all this stuff, and that person absolutely saved my ass because they did a great job of recreating the shot. But it's this freak circumstance where there's a failure, and everything, we did everything right, and it still went wrong. We had backups of drones, we had everything ready. What we didn't do was back up the cards after the first shot. So the lesson learned is every single shot, back it up. Even if you don't think that there's any chance that you would lose that GoPro, swap that card out, get a new one, because you might lose a whole morning's worth of work unexpectedly for when you would never have expected. It's not like it wasn't like this was water or something. Like there's no reason that we shouldn't have been able to. And so it's just, you can be prepared, but when a mistake happens, be a man and just be like, this is the circumstance we're in. I'm going to do whatever I can to make it right. Let's work together to solve this. And, and that's the best that you can do. When you're in a circumstance like that. So yeah, that day sucked a lot. It was not a good day, but we recovered, we got the rest of the shots, and I just, I had to click off of the feelings of failure and just get right back into shooting, get right back into mode, get back into that, mode of being able to fly and fly well. And we made the most of the rest of the day.
That's got to be really gut wrenching. You're like, oh shit.
You feel sick to your stomach.
Footage, yeah, my footage is still on that drone. Is there any other insight, stuff that you think people who are thinking about getting into the pro, advice for them, or anything we haven't covered that you want to make sure we get into the video?
I think my final pieces of advice are always be prepared for any circumstance. So have redundancy, have backups, have everything that you can do to put yourself into place to succeed. Be professional, right? I like to rip balls as much as the next person does, but that's not the attitude that you should have on set. It's all about, how do I do your art the best for you and do it well and represent you well and do all this stuff. So it's not about you. None of it's about you. It's about, how do I represent the vision of the director and the director of photography? And then, and then operate within your means, right? If you have any inclination that you're about to accept something that is bigger than your skill level or the gear that you can provide or your knowledge of where you're at in your career, it might be better to pass on that than potentially damage your relationship with the production company and that production company's relationship with FPV. So yeah, be prepared, work within your means, and represent other people's art well.
I thought of one question. That was a great closer. Now I'm going to rewind. I'm going to rewind you.
No worries.
One of the questions that I asked everybody else, I want to make sure I ask you as well, is how do you know when you're ready to try to go pro? What are some signs that you're not ready to go pro? Maybe you've got a YouTube channel, you've been flying for fun, and now you want to put your shingle out there. And maybe that means you're going to go hit up a bar for a fly through, or maybe you're going to start calling production companies saying, I'm Paul Nurkkala and I fly drones. How would you answer that question? How do you know when you're ready, or if you'd rather take it the other direction, what are some signs that that you're not ready?
So let's just say pro is take money for your work. I think that's the operant definition of pro. And at that point, what I would say is go pro as soon as you can, right? Know that you're capable of operating your drone safely, right? Know that, whatever you're pitching to film, you can actually do. Don't go out and be like, I can fly this X8 cine lifter through your legs, principal actor. Don't fly above where you think you can. But as soon as you can, create the opportunity to get paid for your work. And that's going to give you more experience and more opportunity to go for it and to continue to go after it. So, be safe. I think anybody that's flying knows what safe is, I hope. And then from there, go get paid as soon as you can, because that's going to give you the most experience and the most opportunity. And it's going to give you the chance to build that reel and really go for it. So, just operate within your bounds. And I think that if you sit and just kind of think about, what am I capable of? If all of my flights are flying around in my front yard and I never go for a gap, that's fine. just don't get paid to then fly through people's legs at a bar because you're operating outside of your bounds. Just, find your bounds and get paid for what you can do, and use that opportunity to build skills and get more complicated, more high profile stuff through work rather than for free.